各位官員
Good morning. Good morning, members. Good morning, public officers. We have already formed a quorum. It is also time to start. We have asked many rounds of questions. There's one on the list waiting to ask questions, but the member hasn't arrived. Last time, Mr. Wu Chi-wai asked a question about the Sustainable Lantau Office, and he said that the establishment proposed doesn't quite reflect the nature of sustainability. The administration has submitted a paper to talk about ways to uphold sustainability, and the administration has also come up with some revisions to the duties or responsibilities of certain post holders. Mr. Hon, please, even though Mr. Wu hasn't yet arrived. Well, at your last meeting, Mr. Wu Chi-wai made this point, that is, in relation to the two posts of deputy heads. He would like to know how they could promote sustainability. Yesterday, we sent in this paper. Both of them have to balance both development and conservation. In order to make it clearer, we have now changed the post title of the two deputy heads. One being called Deputy Head Planning and Conservation, and then Deputy Head 1 has now been called Deputy Head Public Works, so that we have the Chief Engineer Lantau 3 under him. So we aren't talking about major changes. However, if it is acceptable to the DSC, before we go to the FC, we are going to submit a paper to you to better reflect this point. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Y. We'll send out the paper. It has been sent out to you. It's been tabled. It was only received yesterday. Let's continue with the questions. The fifth one, Mr. Eddie. Mr. G, yesterday you sent us an email again, raising dozens of questions, covering a wide range. We only received your document yesterday. We didn't even have the chance to provide it to members or public officers. Well, I think it was just a moment ago that we gave the questions to the officers as well as the members. But then some of the questions are repetitive, like the attendance rate of the Disneyland. I think such a question has been asked many times when we approved the funding request for Disneyland, amounting to $5.4 billion. Dr. Helena Wong, 5 minutes. I don't have a question for the time being. No question. All right, so take a rest. Fifth round, Eddie Chu. How many minutes can he have? 1 minute only. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For my question, Madam Chair, in relation to the cost overrun of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, we don't yet know the magnitude. We're really worried about the infrastructure. We want to know about the mode of future infrastructural projects. Professor Edward Yiu has said that in future, for infrastructural projects, the administration must come up with 3 versions at the same time. First of all, Option A, the original option. Option B, alternative one. Option 3, no works. So you need to present all the 3 options to this council as well as the public at large so that we can compare the pros and cons of different options. So can the administration undertake that in relation to Sustainable Lantau, you will be adopting such a model? Mr. Y. Well, for the current proposal, it isn't about infrastructural projects. It is an office, but then the office will be responsible for launching the infrastructural projects, Mr. Hon. I haven't finished. Well, in future, for each and every Lantau project, there will be adequate public consultation exercises, and each time there will be sufficient options. But for us, they are not going to present 3 options. This is about an establishment proposal. If you want to talk about infrastructural projects, go to the development panel. Dr. Edward Yu, third round, 3 minutes. 2 other members are queuing up to ask questions. Well, in relation to the second paragraph of the reply presented today, I'm really shocked. Now we are told that for the non-directorate grade officers, they will come from 7 different grades: engineers, planners, forestry officers, architects, E&M engineers and civil engineers, as well as estate surveyors. Well, I've said that for conservation, what about landscape architects? I think I raised this point last time. You said that you heard my view, but I don't see such a post here. Well, today, what concerns me more is that, you haven't got an estate surveyor for the sake of land resumption. So how are you going to deal with the question? Where are you going to have land resumption? And do you have somebody who's professional and expert in land resumption to assist you? Mr. Hon. Well, for the Sustainable Lantau Office, it is an interdisciplinary team, and we have set out the different grades involved, but it isn't going to be an exhaustive list. Later on, when we have to roll out the projects, I'm sure the office won't just be having the 7 grades that I've mentioned, taking up all the work. But then we are talking about dedicated office, interdisciplinary, overseeing the projects. For the time being, if you talk about mega infrastructural projects, I don't think we are yet at such a stage. Please note that we are talking about a time-limited supernumerary post. Later on, when we have to embark on large-scale infrastructural projects, there is the possibility that we may have to augment the professional team, or we may have to introduce changes. We have named some professional grades, but it isn't an exhaustive list. For planning matters and public works, I think you need to understand the land ownership status, but you haven't got anybody who's an expert here, so you will get things wrong when it comes to planning. Well, in fact, the reference grade is also under the Development Bureau. I don't think it's difficult for us to get the information. By having such an office, it will be better in terms of liaison. So what about land resumption? Are you going to start doing that when you commence the work of the office? There may be small-scale land resumption work. I think that can be easily taken up by the lands department. We aren't talking about large-scale land resumption. It means we don't need the office. Tenure Chen, 3 minutes, third round. I think you talk about low-carbon lifestyle for Lantau, but what about reclamation at the central waters? What about the carbon emission? So you want to have a lot of carbon emission first, and then you will try to have a leisurely life, which is low carbon. I want to know how the Sustainable Lantau Office can help to achieve a low carbon lifestyle. And then it has always been said that there will be a bridge linking up the artificial island with the western part of the Hong Kong island. So what about Hong Kong West? What is the government's idea about the planning? Will this office also take care of the connection? So it means that different parts of Hong Kong will be connected with Lantau, Main Island, as well as Hong Kong West. It means that the traffic flow in terms of commuters will be huge. So how is the office going to address this point? Mr. Hon, Ms. Chen is right. For both Lantau as well as the ELM, we are going to have a smart low-carbon community. I would like to invite my colleague to talk about the connection with the western part of Hong Kong Island. Mr. Lee, when we talk about a green low-carbon community, it means that we encourage green buildings so that we can rely on the advancement of technology so that we can reduce the carbon footprint as much as possible in terms of the traffic network, in terms of the district cooling system, green transport, etc. We won't be using the existing model. We'll be thinking out of the box. We will have in mind a futuristic lifestyle. Say, for example, the walkability of the new community will make it more walkable. And in terms of design, we'll try to make it more pedestrian friendly. Of course, in terms of the reclamation work, there will be construction activities. And the construction methods, the construction materials, like concrete, etc., will be such that we will use an alternative option, and we'll always bear in mind the need to be low carbon as well as a smaller carbon footprint. That will be taken care of at the detailed design stage. Next, Nathan Law, second time, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Good morning. Good morning, Nathan. The administration talks about conservation in the south and development at the north. There will be a bridge or a link linking up Mui Wo, North Lantau, as well as Northwest NT. There will be this circular corridor. I want to know, once it has been constructed, will this jeopardize the ecology and the natural environment of Mui Wo? Because I know the government would like to preserve the rural nature of Mui Wo. Can you tell us the alignment so as to ease our concern? I want to pick up a point made by the other member, and that's about the connection with Kennedy Town. You're going to build a bridge. I want to know about the concept. With the establishment of the office, how are you going to coordinate the bridge and its impact on Kennedy Town? We know that Kennedy Town has capacity problems, too much traffic and too many people. Can the government tell us more about the concept? And in this way, we don't need to be too worried. If you can give us more information about the location as well as the mechanism, it will be better. How can you convince us that by having this office, it will be more facilitating, and then Kennedy Town residents won't have to be sacrificed for the sake of the ELM, overloaded traffic network and more population would affect them. So how are you going to use the office to tackle such problems? Who will take the questions? I will give a brief reply and then Mr. Lee will supplement. I think Mr. Law is concerned about the eastward connection as well as the westward connection of ELM towards the east, Hong Kong Island, towards the west, Mui Bo. Perhaps we can go in the direction of northeast Lantau, but then this cannot be sort of decided at this stage. As I have said, for each and every infrastructural project, we will study the capacity and there will be further consultation. Madam Chair, follow-up question. I think you have an initial concept. Have you got an initial idea about the alignment? Is it going to jeopardize the ecology? With infrastructure, there will be more people. Undeniably, there will be tourism infrastructure as well. Can you really balance development with conservation so that while you build the transport infrastructure, you can also keep the rural nature of Mui Wo? We haven't got the detailed assessment. We need the funding before we can carry out a more detailed assessment in relation to the impact, which is social, ecological, etc. It is a huge project. We won't take it lightly. We can undertake that whenever we carry out such infrastructural projects, we are not going to cause destructive impacts. Once we get the resources, I'm sure we will find a plan which is acceptable to the society, which can conserve the nature and which is best for the economic development of Hong Kong. As I have said, for such a project, there will certainly be an adequate public engagement exercise. What about connection with Hong Kong Island West to make sure that the interests of those residents won't be jeopardized? Mr. Lee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Law. For Kennedy Town, we are having an initial study. The main content would be as follows. That is, in future, if we want to have the East Lantau metropolis, I think the easiest connection will be Hong Kong Island West. We haven't completed the study with some initial views. In other words, if we are to have a bridge or a tunnel to connect with Hong Kong Island, we'll be connected with Hong Kong Island at Kennedy Town. We want to know whether Kennedy Town will be so restricted that there will not be sufficient land for further development. At the same time, we will look at the current development of Kennedy Town. We want to know whether the planning is such that we are imposing restrictions on the location of the portals of the link. Initially speaking, we believe that current planning won't be such that we cannot have sufficient receiving capacity.
We have options for the landing, and whether there will be serious adverse impacts on the community or the environment. We have not seen that. As for the study of the East Lantau metropolis, we have to pay special attention to the following areas in respect of the environment, the ecology, the location of reclamation, and the transport infrastructure. They have to look at these factors. Next, Dr. Fernando Zhang, your third round, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. This is, of course, an application in respect of the establishment of the SLO, the so-called Sustainable Lantau Office. Now, you have just disclosed the scale of the development. It is very big, more than 1,000 hectares of reclamation and hundreds of billions of dollars of investment and large quantity of forest will have to be destroyed. And this office is going to embark on such a large-scale development. We are concerned whether the plan is reasonable, the direction is correct. It's unavoidable to deal with the content of the project in relation to personnel establishment. how can you make sure that certain things can be protected? With regard to these posts, such as some are supernumerary posts and some are related to the professional grades. In your Annex 1, with regard to the dozen or so important posts, I can only see one conservation officer, who is put at a rather low level. You call it sustainable. You use a lofty concept to package this development project, but in your establishment have not seen that there is any guarantee that the development is towards the sustainability. In appointing these heads, deputy heads, and chief engineers, with regard to these important posts, how can you make sure that these leaders have a sustainable background, have knowledge about sustainability, and they will certainly apply sustainability concepts to the present developments? The Secretary, I've said many times before, I require this office to put equal emphasis on development and conservation. Now, in the past, we called it Development Office, and now we call it Sustainable Office. Now, I think it's a matter of culture, and they have to adhere to this culture of sustainability. It is not just dependent on 2 or 3 dedicated staff members who are responsible for sustainability. All the staff members have to uphold this concept. In fact, last Saturday, we issued the blueprint on Sustainable Lantau, and we clearly state that we put equal emphasis on development and sustainability. This is a clear message to the public and to our staff. My question is, your establishment proposals, how can your slogan be implemented, be materialized? You so-called put emphasis on development and sustainability is only a slogan, but these are engineers and they are technocrats, and they used to put emphasis on development in the past. How can you make sure that this team will move towards sustainability? I can only see one conservation officer. The remaining are engineers, and they just put their eyes on development. I think this is based on the assumption that any planner, any engineer, or any professionals will only look at development. I don't agree with this. Starting from last year, I said that everybody in this office have to put equal emphasis on development and sustainability. In development, there must be sustainability. I have yet to hear that in appointing these engineers and planners, they have undergone training in terms of conservation. They have a background on conservation. They must have studied certain courses. They must have participated in certain conservation efforts before I am convinced that you really put equal emphasis on development and conservation. Is there such a need? I believe every professional colleague engages in continuous education, and conservation is a very important element in professional continuous education. Can you show me what posts have to engage in continuous education? You have overrun. Next round, next member, Mr. Chen Chi-chin, 4 rounds. 2 minutes. Now, Chairman, you say that overriding principle should be discussed at the panels. I agree with this general direction, but these posts are related to the overriding policy of sustainable development of Lantau. Now, the Secretary said that the blueprint on sustainable development Lantau was published last Saturday, but in the ESC paper, I have not seen that in the paper the government was going to release the blueprint on Sustainable Development Lantau. Nothing was said at the development panel. The Secretary thought that it was segregated. It had nothing to do with the present ESC issue. I think we should deal with the blueprint of Lantau first before they come to apply for the creation of the posts. That will provide the basis on whether we accept the proposals or not. I wonder how many members have read this sustainable blueprint. You shouldn't just create the posts first. You should not segregate the two. In this blueprint, page 52, it is said that the blueprint is to provide guidance for the development, sustainable development Lantau. So will the SLO comply with the guidelines, and also whether the SLO will conduct a wide consultation or will have the authority to conduct a wide consultation on the blueprint and also amend the blueprint. In fact, the blueprint was mentioned in the CE's policy address. He said that in the beginning or in the middle of this year, there will be a blueprint on Sustainable Development Lantau. And I also said that and in fact we were late in respect of providing the blueprint. It is a blueprint, it's a roadmap, it's a timetable for sustainable development of Lantau. This is a guiding document. As for consultation, we did 3 months of public consultation last year, and we adopted public views before drawing up the blueprints. Chairman, my question is very clear. I asked about this office and its relation to the blueprints. Can the office make substantial changes to the blueprint? The blueprints are working guidelines, but they are it is a higher level document, and we cannot rule out the possibility of amending this. But we can see that this blueprint is the guiding, the guideline. Mr. Look, your first round, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. My questions are rather simple. I am not long-winded. The development Lantau is not simple. It's twice the size of Hong Kong Island. We have shortage of land resources. We suffer from shortage of land resources. Unavoidably, there is a need to develop Lantau. Not too many people prefer to keep Lantau as it is. The development is the majority view. There should be suitable level of development in Lantau. I therefore support the setting up of the SLO. I think there is a strange logic. Sometimes they said officials have not done their job in doing consultation, doing planning. On the other hand, they don't allow the government to create posts. I think the posts have to be matched with the plans. This is a basic personnel arrangement. Without the bodies, then there will be problems with planning, and there will be more mistakes and flaws. I therefore support the CEDD's proposal of creating posts for the SLO. Now, there is the doubt about long-term plans for the development of Lantau. Can the authorities give the following undertaking? With regard to the duties and responsibilities of these posts, what are the best arrangement? Now, it is said that only one forestry officer is responsible for conservation. Many people are concerned about conservation. More than half of Lantau is for conservation. Will you review your manpower allocation? If there is only one person responsible for conservation, I'm concerned the workload will be too heavy. and he may not be able to look after all the matters, all the routine matters. First, on conservation. Yesterday we submitted the paper, and that is Annex 1. On the left-hand side, there is a whole team showing that there will be a whole team to look after conservation. There are 3 conservation officers. You may still feel that the number is too few. As I've said, we put equal emphasis on development and sustainability. Development will incorporate sustainable elements, and sustainability doesn't mean closing off Lantau. It's too simple. We should provide the opportunity to people to enjoy the resources. There can be small-scale development to facilitate access. So in development, there is sustainability, and within sustainability, there is development. And the colleagues are required to put equal emphasis on sustainability and development, so you don't need to worry about it. As for the long-term blueprint, last Saturday we published the blueprint. And from now to beyond 2030, this is the blueprint for development and sustainability of Lantau. This is our preliminary thinking. In drawing up the in developing Lantau, we need to do some planning according to the blueprint. It doesn't mean that there are adequate manpower for the SLO. We have strategic infrastructure for East Lantau. The scores of people for SLO will not be adequate to handle all these big projects, but we do need people to start preliminary planning and studies. As for short to medium term works, such as sewerage and roads, we also need the bodies to make the planning and arrangements and to conduct the works. We need this team to start their work. Mr. Chu Hai-dik, your 6th round of question. I want to ask Mr. Chu, do you have any 31A motions? Yes, I do. But I'm selecting this. I just want to screen them for you. Thank you for your concern, and thank you for being considerate. But I have to wait. I have to make arrangements because many departments are waiting. Give me half an hour and I will be able to finish that. We have a 4-hour meeting today. Now, since there are few people here, although there are few people here, I will move our Rule 33 motion. Yes, I move that motion. Can you give me a minute? You mean suspension of this meeting or adjourn this meeting? No, adjourn this item. I still have 1 minute to ask my question. Yes, I give you 1 minute to ask your question. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, the Permanent Secretary didn't answer me clearly. I refer to the consultation. You will conduct consultations, but consultation may not be the best way to deal with conflicts, and therefore I propose that in the future, when you apply for funding for which are huge amounts and which are controversial, then you can put different options before the council so that we can discuss. So you have digressed to consultation, so I want to ask you whether you will adopt this approach so that there will be full consultation. The Permanent Secretary, for large-scale projects, there will be public engagement, and it is very detailed. It is not very simple as to whether we will do it or not do it. There are various options put before the public. Mr. Chu does not need to worry. As usual, we will engage in detailed public engagement process. There will be adequate options and adequate consultation. So your question is answered. So do you want to move a motion? Yes, I moved motion under ROP 32. Mr. Chu Hai Take propose a motion according to Section 32 of the Rules of Procedure of the ESC and ask for adjournment of this item. EC 2016-17-29. You may now speak, but no more than once. Mr. Chu. And the time limit is 3 minutes. And I suggest if members want to speak, please speak for no more than 3 minutes each. If you want to speak, please press a button. Mr. Chu first. Thank you, Chairman. This morning, there are only a few people here, and I still want to move the motion of adjournment because we want to tell the people of Hong Kong that this ESC discussion on the creation of posts for SLO is a very serious matter, and we need to speak out very clearly in respect of our position on the development of Lantau. Chairman, I have no objection to the arrangement of development on the north and conservation in the south. I look at 3 principles: whether it saves money, whether it saves public money. Number 2, whether if the government feels that it is helpful to the public, then can the administration give the right to the people of Hong Kong to decide whether to develop or not. And third, whether the new land will be providing land for affordable housing so that all the citizens will be benefited. Madam Chairman, the first question, I have not much time for cost saving. I have not seen any measure, any sincerity on the part of the government. They say there will be many options available for the development of Lantau. But if you look at the track record, from the discussion on Lantau to the blueprints, there has been no change. Everything remains the same. It is the artificial island of East Lantau. The infrastructure will be in the range of $300–400 billion. The Democratic Party supports development. Mr. Wu Chi-wai proposes no development of Lantau and no reclamation at Hailing Chow. The government has not responded. Let me respond to Mr. Look. You said that we didn't allow them to create posts. They will finally create the posts, but we need to set out the conditions clearly. Therefore, I ask whether in the future, because of this controversial issue, when they make proposals to this council, there is they should not just provide a proposal that can never be changed. They can give us yes, no, and also an alternative. We have no objection towards development. The question is, how should development be conducted for the benefit of people of Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Dr. Fernando Cheung, 3 minutes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. As my previous question stated, there are quite some inadequacies in the development because it not only involves the creation of new posts. We're talking about creation of 20-odd posts. So that is quite a major scale development and would bring along large scale construction and development in Lantau. Well, we have now changed the name of the office, so can it really become sustainable? I am a bit worried about that, because from the past development on Lantau, we see that in areas such as in Lantau South, where there is supposed to be conservation, we see many rural areas being built into luxury residences. And today, for the second phase of reclamation of 60 hectares, nothing has been done there. We're talking about it leaving out in the open for about 8 to 9 years. However, we're still talking about further reclamation and in building about 1,000 hectares of artificial island. Have we really considered public justice? Are we just trying to develop yet forget conservation? Are we trying to move the poor and instead build luxury residences in its place? And we'll continue to be locked in this high property price market in which everyone in Hong Kong will need to work his or her entire life just to afford housing. I don't think this is the way forward for Hong Kong people. It is not actually conducive to public development and not the way forward for all of us and to conservation. Well, we are now going back into the old method to trying to tear down the good and to take away the assets from the poor and hand them over to the wealthy. I do not want to see more yacht clubs. Mr. Lok Chung Hong. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the public knows the moving adjournment of any item is a kind of filibustering. I'm sure the public has very clear eyes. We need to look into providing more housing for the public and to look into enhancing the facilities for Lantau residents. I have listened carefully to Mr. Zhu Hoi Dick's views. He's talking about participation and public money, but we are not into this area yet. We're still only talking about the initial stage of development. Do we have to start from zero, the blueprint of Lantau? I really cannot accept this. I'm sure that the public wants development to start as soon as possible because the more the delay, the more expensive the cost will be. And that means you will be wasting more taxpayers' money. So, logically speaking, that does not make sense. We hope that these posts could be created as soon as possible so that we'll be able to really enhance development and to try to enhance the quality of life of Lantau residents. For those living in Changsha, Mui Wo, Tai O, they face many issues such as traffic congestion, especially during public holidays. These really are issues that need to be dealt with as soon as possible. Of course, there are both pros and cons to any sort of development. And it would be controversial. But if you want to resolve all controversies before you create a post, I think you'll still not be able to do anything by 2047. This is something very important that we need to do as soon as possible, and I object to this adjournment. Anyone else who would like to speak? Mr. Shiu Ka-fei, 3 minutes, please. Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. Our role as a legislative council is to address questions to officials and try to understand the different plans. But for such development plans with legislative councils trying to filibuster and delay the development, I really do not agree. We're talking about a creation of new posts for government officials. If there's not enough manpower, you will not get anything done, even if you work 24 hours a day. Recently, we've seen a problem with the cement bricks at the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. Therefore, if we do not have enough manpower, then we'll not be able to resolve the problems. We are opening these posts so that we'll be able to further develop Lantau. Property prices are high. Many people do not have anywhere to live. Labor is also expensive, and also construction materials. And Madam Chair, you know, if we do not develop our land, then we're not going to be able to supply low-cost housing for the public. These are all problems faced by the public every single day. The development of Lantau will help resolve the issue of high property prices. I understand Mr. Chu is very concerned with minority groups, but I would like to remind you, Mr. Chu, that many people in Hong Kong are faced with housing problems, and we do need to open up more land to provide ample supply of housing. The creation of these posts actually help us monitor the use of land and how we develop the land. I'm sure the public hopes for development of Lantau as soon as possible. Many people are living in subdivided units, and I don't think we should delay this item any longer. I would support this item, and I object to Mr. Chu's motion. Mr. Yu Si Wing. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have inadequate supply of land in Hong Kong, yet population continues to grow. Young people will need to find their own way forward in the future. So land is actually a huge problem for everyone. We need to find new ways to open up new land. We cannot solely rely on Hong Kong Island and Kowloon. So I think it is pragmatic of the government to look into development on Lantau. The administration proposes to create posts in Lantau to bring forward Lantau development. And we see from the blueprint that the Lantau development is mainly on the peripherals of Lantau. We're not actually touching the conservation areas nor the country parks. The government is only trying to open up more land through reclamation to provide more housing for the public. So I don't understand why you need to adjourn this item. What is the reasoning behind this adjournment? Are you trying to filibuster the policies in Hong Kong? You really do have to consider the benefits of the public on the whole, and not just to be selfish enough to look only at your own needs. So we really should look into the entire development of Hong Kong. So I object to this adjournment. Mr. Wu Chi Wai. the administration has issued a paper. If you have any problems, please consult the Secretariat. Thank you, Madam Chair. We believe that the 4 posts creation is to continue with the direction of development in the north and conservation for the south. And most of the development is focused along the North Lantau Road, and therefore the Democratic Party is mainly in favor of this item. The supernumerary posts created today should conserve the south, but if they do not do that, then we will move a then we would move motions not to support this anymore. But at this moment, we see that the creation can really help us to enhance Lantau development up till 2047. And so at this stage, we do need more manpower to deal with the Tong Chong North and South development projects and the Siu Ho Wan reclamation areas and Sunny Bay reclamation. We really must begin construction work at those sites. Therefore, my view is that since these are only supernumerary posts, our party will support this item. But I must also seriously point out that by 2021, if you apply for extension of these posts and you haven't kept up your promise of developing at the south, then we would not support the post by then. If you continue with the concept of including Hailing Chow and Mui Wo in your reclamation and to build roads there, then we would object to your item then. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. I can really feel from Mr. Wu's views that some people in the Democratic Party are reasonable. Some people are trying to filibuster by moving motions to adjourn any items, no matter on which committee. You're just trying to delay all the items, to delay all the development. You're asking questions that deviate from the topics. And there's nothing much more you can ask, and then you move your motions. You even said that you need half an hour to move your 31As. And you're still smirking over there. Let's see how long you can smirk. You are a legislative councillor. Should you work for the betterment of Hong Kong? Or just try to delay all development items? Mr. Nathan Law. Madam Chair, Mr. Wong said we are trying to use all methods to stop development, but I think everything is written down in the rules of procedure, and nothing is new. Everything is included in the rules of procedure. Well, if you talk about something new, then you should really look into some people trying to work together with the CE. That's really something new. The administration has not really responded to many of our concerns. There has not been full consideration. Look at the Kai Tak cruise terminal. It is already a very good example. It is not successful at all. We're talking about the East Lantau metropolis. We're talking about using around 400 billion for such development, and you're talking about a population of around 9 million. Well, even at the peak, we will only have around 8.2 million people in Hong Kong. But of course, the government would say that an extra 10% would be reasonable. But the capacity stated here, you need also to look into the cost, which is 1,000 hectares of reclamation land, and many NGOs are actually questioning whether it would damage the ecology on Lantau. Although you said that there would be conservation at the south, many NGOs are concerned with whether you would really be able to ensure the ecology would be safe with all this construction and development. Do we really need infrastructure to lead our economy? We see that the government already has a deficit in infrastructure. We're spending around 100 billion extra each year. If we could use this money in other areas and put it to better use, maybe Hong Kong economy will have new directions and new way forward. So I agree and support the adjournment of this item. Is this really a good blueprint of Lantau, or is it just a blueprint without any strong structure for further development? So I support Mr. Chu's adjournment. Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, 3 minutes, please. Good morning, Madam Chair. In response to Mr. Nathan Law's rules of procedure are used by all of us, but everyone seated here understand that the rules of procedure only work for the gentlemen, because all this filibustering is trying to delay development of Hong Kong. You're just trying to delay the time. I didn't want to speak just now, but I listened to what Mr. Wong said now, to how to describe these people. But Mr. Chu came up with a very good term that they are just insane and crazy in moving a motion to adjourn this item. Wait, Mr. Chu. A point of order is Mr. Kwok Wai Kang pointing out that I'm insane and crazy. I'm just using the term you used yourself. Madam Chair, I'm not sure whether you heard clearly. I don't know why Mr. Kwok quoted as I saying myself as insane and crazy. Is he pointing out that I am insane and crazy? Well, can you take turns in speaking, Mr. Kwok? Are you stating that Mr. Chu is insane and crazy? No, I'm just quoting what he said. So what did he say? Mr. Wong asked what kind of word he should use to describe Mr. Chu, and Mr. Chu said himself insane and crazy. Mr. Chu Hoi Dick, did you say that? I'm sorry. Please take turns in speaking. Please take turns.
Take your turn. Well, we have to judge it in good context. Mr. Wong was criticizing me, and then he ran out of words. he could not think of a way to criticize me. So I asked him whether he would like to describe me in this way, and then I uttered 4 characters, insanely frenzied. You weren't criticizing yourself. I don't know why Mr. Kwok is trying to understand me in this way, but of course he is airing an allegation at me. Now, Mr. Chu has already said that he's clarifying his position. He's not criticizing himself. He's not describing himself as being insanely frenzied. I just hope that we can be peaceful, calm, and rational. We have different ideas. We have different views. Let's not Let's all refrain from using radical language. Mr. Kwok, would you like to use another phrase? I've run out of words. I think I will just adopt the phrase mentioned by Mr. Chu. I think that's the most suitable one. I'm not here to pick a quarrel. I hope he will withdraw that phrase. Madam Chair, it's only when you rule that it is not correct, then I have to consider withdrawing it. I'm not going to make a ruling in relation to what you have said, but I just hope that members should try to avoid using too radical a diction. Now, I accept what you said. You used that phrase thinking that Mr. Chu was criticizing himself. I think you were partially substantiated, and I think the debate on this point should come to an end. Let's be time conscious. Mr. Ho, is there a need to carry on? Well, if you said that there's not respectful, then what about being shameless? I think you should treat them the same. Mr. Holden Chow, the opposition camp would like to adjourn the discussion of the development of Lantau. I think they are going overboard. Madam Chair, for this item, this is about the development of Lantau. Whether we're talking about the artificial island, which can house 700,000 people. And then for Tung Chung East, we can accommodate another 100,000 people. Through different channels, we have already said that should there be concerns about the transport network, of course the government should find a way to solve it. But does it mean that just by raising the concerns and so we have to suspend the discussion and we should even stop the government from getting the proposal approved? I think this is outrageous. This is going too far. Now, in the future, 700,000 people will live on the artificial island, but it's not for our own generation. Rather, it's for the well-being of the coming generation. I believe that the government doesn't just work for the short-term well-being. I think the government has got in mind the long-term interests. Now, the opposition camp would like to suspend the debate. They are moving an adjournment motion. I think this is being irresponsible. Now, Nathan Law has said that we shouldn't use infrastructure to drive the economy. My question is there a better way to drive our economy? Now, for us, for infrastructural projects like this one, well, to be frank, it doesn't just promote one particular sector. Many other industries will benefit. There will be more jobs arising from infrastructural projects. I want to clarify this point. We have been faced with the shortage of housing. Now, through this project, we are going to have a long-term solution. So let's all come back to our senses. Please don't move any more motion to adjourn so that we can get down to real work. Let's hope that our future generation won't have to face the problem of housing shortage. Mr. Ray Chen, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Houghton Chow is the one that is going overboard. He's the extreme case. Tomorrow we are going to censure him. Mr. Ray Chen, please come back to the theme. Let's talk about Lantau, not on anything else. Mr. Wang Tengguang has said that Mr. Chu and the opposition camp are moving this adjournment motion because we won't tolerate any opposing views. I don't think we are in such a position. For such a criticism, it should be better targeted at the CCP as well as CY. You have digressed. I just want to come back to say why I support the motion to adjourn. No one is saying that we will never have any development. Development at the north and conservation for the south. I think this is the consensus of the majority of us. I support the motion to adjourn. It doesn't mean that it should be shelved forever. I've made myself clear. The administration has just published the blueprint on a sustainable Lantau. We want to develop the blueprint first, and then we can vote on the establishment proposal. But then the Development Bureau is saying that the two matters are separate. But of course, you would say that the posts should have been created a long time ago. You try to add the word sustainable to the title of the office. I think the best way is to wait for the panel discussion of that paper, or we should also have a public hearing on Lantau, and then members will be invited to vet the ESC proposal. Maybe some members will say that it is but supernumerary in nature and we can wait and judge, but I don't think it is acceptable to me. And then for the development panel, we haven't got any agenda item for the Sustainable Lantau blueprint. At the FC meeting, maybe you can collude with Mr. Chen Kin-po and we won't be able to have a debate about this paper. If you are really sincere in getting our views, why haven't you attached this report to our paper? My earlier question was, can we suggest substantial changes? The question wasn't answered. I think it's better for us to wait till the development panel meeting has been held. I think we should look at that first before we come back here. So I support Mr. Chu's point. Does anybody else wish to speak? If not, then I'll give the floor to the public officers. Madam Chair, let me give a brief reply for this ESC proposal. That is, we would like to create the Sustainable Lantau Office. I think probably it was towards the end of the year 2015 that the idea was floated. And in fact, last year, we had the approval from the ESC to queue up for our turn to get the approval from the FC. As you know that last year there were many papers stuck in the backlog of the FC meeting. So this year we do it again. We have gone through the different stages, and in terms of timing, we've spent more than a year's time. Last year, a similar question has been raised at a ESC meeting. We have been asked whether it would be fine for us to wait for another few months. Well, we've waited for almost a year, not just a few months. For the development of Lantau, we are a professional department. We believe that Lantau is important for for long-term development. We have got a lot of infrastructural projects. We believe that Lantau plays a very important role. It is important in the sense of being strategic in the long-term development, both in the international context as well as in the context of the PRD. As to whether there is indeed the necessity for the development of Lantau, etc., I won't go over the points again. In Hong Kong, we badly need land. Whether to accommodate a larger population. I think for the sake of the quality of life, I think you will understand my point. And then the population is aging, the buildings are aging. For the sake of both, we need more land before we can resolve the problems. Well, for the central waters, for us to have reclamation there, I think the idea was raised a few years ago. We have yet to get money to carry out any initial study, so we have already been delayed for quite a substantial period of time. Some of you are concerned as to whether there will be large-scale or massive destruction of the natural environment. Now, last week we have the Let's Shape a Sustainable Lantau paper. I hope you will be convinced that the government is being sincere. Development at the north, conservation for the south. I think this is in line with the idea in a paper issued a decade ago, that is the revised Lantau development concept. So development will be focused in the north, and for the south Lantau, we are going to conserve it. You are worried as to whether there will be a road destroying Lantau. Well, as I have said, in relation to Mr. Law's question, well, we have some initial ideas about the alignment of the road. At this moment, we cannot be sure about the accurate location of the alignment. We are not sure which is the best alignment. Even if we are to launch the project, it will be in phase as different stages, and then the public will have a chance to tell us what they think. Here we come here to get your approval to create the Sustainable Lantau Office. As I have said, we have already been delayed, and the projects have been held up. The blueprint should have been published last year. We haven't got this Lantau office, and so the resources are scattered, and we were not as efficient as we would like to be. Now, I think the direction is right. Last year, there was a 3-month public consultation exercise. We took on board the public feedback, and that's the basis of our blueprint. So, owing to the reasons that I've outlined, I hope you will support my view, that is, you should vote against the motion to adjourn. Mr. Chu, you have got 3 minutes to reply. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 points. First, Holden Chow referred to a very important point in our debate. That is, the community of Hong Kong should ask ourselves this question. That is, for Hong Kong in the 21st century, do we want to continue with our model in the 20th century, that is, using mega infrastructural projects to drive the economic development of Hong Kong? I think throughout the world, many other places have adopted an alternative. This is because we are aware of the crisis that we are facing. We know that financial implications are not to be ignored. In Hong Kong, I think this is a hot issue. For the Capital Works Reserve Fund, every year we have to spend $100 billion. But it is not sitting there waiting for us to use. In fact, we need to get the money, and this is by way of our land disposal program. And that's why we cannot abandon the high land price policy. And as a result, the citizens are caught in the property swirl, and we are not able to get away from it. The majority of us cannot have an affordable home, so we'll become slaves of the property market. All such things are integrated. So let me say this once again. For the Lantau strategy, we are not saying that there shouldn't be any development at all. We also subscribe to the principle of development at the north and conservation for the south. I think the key question is how we can make the best effort to make the greatest savings. Mr. Hon, the Permanent Secretary, has been saying that there will be different options for us to choose from, but I don't think so. We haven't got any other options to choose from. Now, for the reclamation at the near shore of North Lantau, Can we think of that so as to replace the recommendation for the ELM? Mr. Wu has also said that we shouldn't touch Mui Wo and Hailing Chow. I think such options are not present in your blueprint. Don't try to give us the perception that we have options with alternatives. Now, you're simply saying that for the reclamation, it is definitely going ahead. It's only that the landing point can be negotiable, either moving it towards the east by 1 kilometer or to the west. Well, we want to weigh the pros and cons. We want to get the best choice that is in the best public interest. So I'll put the matter to the vote. That is, this subcommittee suspends the discussion in relation to EC 2016-17-29. Those who are in favor, please raise your hands. You claim a division. Yes, the bell will be rung for 5 minutes.
請而家開始表決。
And would members proceed to vote? Please check your vote. Voting is closed. The result is displayed. 14 votes against, 9 votes for. The motion is negatived. We now move on with our discussion. The fourth round. Dr. Fernando Chong. You have 2 minutes. Mr. Chu? Yes, please. Be quick, Mr. Chu, if there is any motion. I've asked a question which has not been answered. Concerning these establishment proposals, including the 4 supernumerary posts and the nearly 20 newly redeployed posts, what sort of training, what sort of professional knowledge, what sort of experience can convince us that the development of Lantau puts equal emphasis on conservation and development? The Permanent Secretary, Chairman, I have already answered the question. Our colleagues have to do both in terms of development and conservation. You are worried whether they can do it or not. You have to observe this, as said by Mr. Wu. These are supernumerary posts. We have issued a blueprint emphasizing both. You may not be convinced, but you can see what we do and whether we can achieve that. Please do not jump to the conclusion that they are town planners, they are engineers, and they are only for development. This is not true. In their daily work, they have to look after both. Chairman, how can we trust them? We look at track record. And the track record is they just ignore conservation, they just emphasize on development. It is the same team. They are the same professionals. You have not shown us their background and how different they are. Of the 20 or so posts, there is only 1 forestry officer or conservation officer, and in the establishment, I have not seen the balance. Now you say that the chief engineers, the town planners are for conservation. Tell me what background on conservation do they have? In redeploying your staff members, how do you look at their experience in terms of conservation, their understanding towards forestry, towards climate, towards water conservation, so that you can show us that it is really a balanced development? This is about the establishment of the personnel establishment, and therefore I ask what personnel measures to materialize your slogan. I give time to Mr. Chang. You answer the question. If you look at track record, I hope you can see that you don't just look at some projects. You should look at the overall situation. If you look at the DSD, there are many green measures which have been taken and have been reported in the press. The culture is very clear. There must be development. There must be sustainability in development. Even if I say 100 times, you may not trust me. Just observe what we do, and you will see that we will do it. Mr. Wu Chiwai, which round? Ms. Chiang Lai-wan, your second round, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. We used to ask this question when we were young. Hong Kong Island has just 100 square kilometers, and Lantau 147 square kilometers, so 1.5 times of that of Hong Kong Island. Hong Kong Island is very congested. Why can't we develop Lantau? It was costly in those days. It was mountainous. There was need to cut the slopes and provide power and water supply. Therefore, the British Hong Kong government didn't develop Lantau. Now, this term of the government has a vision, and in the long run, there is a need to find more space. Developing Lantau is good and should be congratulated. In the recent meetings, whether the members of the pro-establishment or the pan-democrats have asked many questions. I think the authorities have the responsibility in terms of at least publicity. Now, there was some consultation for several months. A committee was set up, studies were undertaken. Now, this is a 100 square kilometer project. This is precious resources of the people of Hong Kong. It is about the livelihood of the next generation. There is a need to conduct more studies. It's not just a few pages. There's a need for more publicity. A few months ago, I went to the town planning exhibition hall. Now, that one is next to the City Hall. Well, I nearly cried. It is the ugliest. I didn't see anything. I just saw a few clips, and the clips were worse than anything on YouTube. Anything about Hong Kong on YouTube. Now, we have so many projects. When we enter the exhibition hall, we can let young people see the future of Hong Kong, the future of Lantau. I've been to Beijing. They allowed us to get on a certain machine like a bus, and we are able to see what Beijing will look like after 10 years. We are deeply moved, or we were deeply moved. You need to present this project better to more people in Hong Kong. You need to do more publicity. You do need to make more animations. You should get the budget for redeveloping your exhibition, town planning exhibition hall, to make it a top class in the world. Yes, we are concerned about publicity and promotion. The Lantau Development Consultation Committee has a PR and promotion or publicity working group. I've heard the comment on the City Exhibition Hall. They are doing some renovation works, and there will be better exhibits. Yes, publicity is very important. Members, we have Mr. Wu Chi-wai, who is asking for the 5th round. I have received Mr. Chu Hai-dik and Mr. Chen Chi-chun's Section 31 motions, and we have been discussing it for a long time. And the next item is for the keeping an AO staff grade C supernumerary post in the CCF Secretariat. This is urgently needed. So after Mr. Wu has asked his questions, I will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes, and then I will deal with the motions. Mr. Wu. The Lantau Development Office is now called the SLO, and the structure and functions of the SLO have been clarified, and the north development in the north and conservation in the south is dovetailed with the SLO. That is something that one should appreciate. But there is the issue of mistrust in terms of I hope that the Permanent Secretary will consider the following. You should have the snapshot Lantau. Say, for example, air quality, water quality, there is a snapshot or a benchmark as a baseline, in particular with regard to Southern Lantau. Secondly, the SLO should provide an annual report on the progress of conservation, so that in Lantau, so that the relevant panels can assess whether conservation can be achieved, has been achieved under the SLO. The Permanent Secretary, I think these are good suggestions from Mr. Wu. Baseline surveys are necessary. Reports are necessary. That's for certain. We will report to the development panel on a regular basis. We'll do that. All right, we adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes. I will study the two motions that we moved by the members.